Cassandra Ong, once held in contempt and detained, now reportedly at large. Her case sits at the intersection of legislative authority, criminal investigation, and international enforcement. This is a deeper look at what happened, why it matters, and the gaps her disappearance exposes. Part 1. How she became a target. Cassandra Ong emerged in public scrutiny as the authorized representative of Lucky South 99, a large offshore gaming operation based in Porak. The facility was the subject of raids and multiple investigations after testimonies and evidence suggested systemic abuses, including forced confinement and the exploitation of foreign workers. Investigators described the site as more than a gaming complex, alleging it functioned as a scam and trafficking hub, with recruitment, transport, and harsh containment all coordinated on site. Because of her role, Ong was not treated as a peripheral employee. She was a named contact, someone who signed documents and interfaced with partners linked to the compound. Part TWO detention under congressional authority during hearings into POGO-related abuses. Ong was cited in contempt by a congressional committee. That citation led to her detention and later transfer to a correctional facility for women. The detention stemmed from legislative authority, a sanction meant to compel compliance with lawmakers' inquiries. While in custody, she engaged with investigators and filed defenses against preliminary allegations of human trafficking. At that point, the process was twofold: a legislative posture of contempt to secure testimony and a separate criminal trajectory that could culminate in formal charges. Part 3. The turning point, release, and timing. The pivotal moment came when her detention lapsed amid a congressional transition. Authorities acknowledged that the contempt order was tied to the mandate of the outgoing legislature. When that mandate expired, so did the statutory basis for holding her under that particular detention order. Her release occurred before prosecutors formally filed criminal charges in court. By the time qualified human trafficking charges were submitted, AOM was already outside state custody. That sequence, detention tied to legislative authority, release during transition, and later filing of criminal charges converted a controlled investigation into a complicated, time-sensitive manhunt. Part 4. Confirmation. Last known movements and international notices. Government officials later confirmed Ong is considered at large. Tracking reports placed her last in Japan earlier in the year, and law enforcement agencies have circulated international notices. An arrest warrant has been issued domestically, and authorities say they are coordinating with foreign counterparts to determine her precise whereabouts. The presence of international alerts underscores the cross-border dimension of the case, but they are not a guarantee of immediate apprehension. Legal, diplomatic, and practical hurdles remain. Part 5. Gachalians, public statements, and systemic implications. Senators and other public officials have voiced frustration over the sequence of events. One prominent lawmaker characterized her release as a procedural gap that allowed a potentially high-risk suspect to slip through. The criticism centers not on the legality of the individual steps, but on how legislative and enforcement mechanisms failed to align. Contempt detention was used for investigative leverage, but it was not converted into criminal custody in time. That mismatch reveals a structural vulnerability when agencies rely on different authorities for detention and prosecution. Suspects can fall into a jurisdictional seam. Part SIX, Lucky South 99. Why her role matters. Understanding Ong's alleged conduct requires understanding. Lucky South 99. Investigators portray the compound as organized, with layered management, recruitment networks that sourced foreign workers, and infrastructure to both house and control those workers. Witness statements describe tight security, restricted movement, and technology used to run illicit online operations. As the authorized representative, AHON is alleged to have participated in or enabled administrative and operational activities tied to these functions. Her arrest, or testimony if she cooperated, could provide the missing links: who financed operations, how recruitment and transport were coordinated, and which individuals or entities profited most. Part 7. Risks, loopholes, and policy lessons. Ong's disappearance raises immediate enforcement problems and broader policy questions. First, the risk of international flight. When a person with alleged involvement in organized exploitation leaves national territory, extradition, diplomatic engagement, and international policing become central. Second, procedural gaps. Reliance on contempt mechanisms without securing criminal custody can create escape windows during political transitions. Third, interagency coordination. Immigration, legislative bodies, prosecutors, and international liaison offices must operate on the same timeline to prevent loss of custody. Finally, public trust. High-profile cases that result in apparent evasion threaten confidence in institutions tasked with protecting victims and enforcing the law. Part 8. Victims, accountability, and the human cost. Beyond procedure and politics is the human toll. Allegations surrounding Lucky South 99 include accounts of coercion, abuse, and deprivation suffered by workers who were allegedly trafficked or exploited. Each delay or failure to secure a key suspect is a delay in the search for truth and restitution for victims. Accountability is not solely punitive, it is also investigative. A full, transparent process including custody, witness examination, and open court proceedings is essential to validate victims' accounts, identify the full chain of responsibility, and prevent recurrence. Part 9. What success looks like. Effective resolution would include a few concrete outcomes: the lawful apprehension and extradition of the suspect, expedited, thorough prosecution that respects due process, protective measures and reparations for victims, and institutional reforms to prevent similar procedural lapses. Transparency and interagency protocols should be strengthened so that detention arising from legislative inquiries can be transitioned to prosecutorial custody when warranted, without a window for disappearance. Conclusion. Questions that remain: how did the timing of congressional authority translate into a release rather than continued custody? Where exactly is Cassandra Leong now, and will international cooperation be sufficient to return her for trial? Will the agencies involved learn from this episode and close the gaps between legislative tools and criminal enforcement? Until those questions are answered and she is brought before a court, the Lucky South 99 story will remain unresolved, victims will still wait, and the legal and institutional lessons from this case will be deferred.